Good afternoon, classmates. As you may remember, last week we were assigned an influential individual from the history of photography and tasked to devise a presentation to persuade all of you attractive, logical people that our assigned individual invented photography. We, that is Libby, Erica, and Steve, were assigned Nicéphore Niépce, who was born Joseph Niépce, and as such we shall call him Joe. Now, before we attempt this, allow me to define a thing or two first. What is an inventor exactly? Well, here is a dictionary definition of the thing an inventor does: invent. It's a verb, to create or design something that has not existed before, to be the originator of. Secondly, it is important that we define photography. I mean not to insult you all, as I am well aware that we are mostly photo majors, but I do want to clarify the exact thing we are claiming Mr. Niépce, again, henceforth Joe, invented. For today's purposes, I will briefly define the complex topic of photography as the art, science, and practice of creating lasting physical images by recording light chemically by means of a light-sensitive material, such as photographic film. Anyway, with all that firmly nailed down, let us begin the presentation. Here is Joe. He was born in 1765, which meant that he was of a sufficient age and well-learned enough to invent photography when it came time to invent photography in the early 1800s. Also, conveniently, his lack of drawing ability gave him plenty of motive to circumvent the process of drawing through the invention of photography. He was born to a wealthy lawyer, meaning he had the necessary resources to invent, and as such he invented many other things which we don't have time to list, one of which was the internal combustion engine. His research also provided the foundations for the modern-day implementations of bicycles and motorcycles. His first successful photograph is actually more akin to a scanned document. The sun was allowed to expose a photosensitive material through an engraving, effectively tracing that engraving and creating what you see here in 1825. Not long after that, though, just a year later actually, he managed to utilize a contemporary camera obscura to create an 8-hour exposure of a scene outside his window, which he had already tried to draw. Here is that drawing, and here is the photograph of the same scene. So there we have it. Joe invented photography. This photograph is his earliest still surviving photograph. Though he had succeeded in inventing photography, a lot of refinement was needed, as you can see. In an effort to do that, he teamed up with Daguerre, and they worked until Joe's death in 1833. Together, they continued to innovate and ultimately created a technique we know today as the physotype, and eventually the daguerreotype. So now that you know how it all happened, we return to the question of who really invented photography. There are a few candidates, who are of course the subjects of other presentations today. As you can see from just the first paragraph in Wikipedia's History of Photography, many people made the contributions necessary to eventually facilitate photography over the course of hundreds of years. Daguerre improves upon Joe's imperfect and limited techniques, and Talbot had invented a similar photographic technique, which he called photography with an IE at the end, but not until a few years after Joe had done the same. Talbot went on to perfect the calotype technique, which eventually created negatives from which multiple positives could be made, and eventually made it available to the masses. These and many other talented and thoughtful individuals provided countless contributions to photography as we know it today, but the first man to successfully put it all together and actually create a photograph was Joe. Thank you.